In a previous video, I talked about industry profitability and Michael Porter's 5 forces model. And what I want to do in this video is go into a little more detail about one of those 5 forces that affects industry profitability. In this case, I'm going to look at the threat of substitutes. Now, the more substitutes there are for an industry's products, the less profitable the industry is going to be. Now keep in mind this is an industry analysis, so we're not talking about substituting a Ford for a Honda. We're talking about substituting, for example, a motorcycle for an automobile. Or we're talking about substituting mass transit for an automobile. And how are we going to determine what a substitute is? Well, one way to do it is to use the concept in economics of cross-price elasticity. And the cross-price elasticity, denoted by epsilon Cp here, is equal to the percentage change in the quantity of Y divided by the percentage change in the price of X. So we're going to see when we change the price of one good, what happens to another good's demand. Okay. If the quantity of Y rises when the price of X rises, then we say that X and Y are substitutes. For example, butter and margarine. If the price of butter goes up, people may shift away and buy more margarine. On the other hand, if the quantity of Y falls when the price of X rises, then we say that X and Y are complements. So a good example is peanut butter and jelly. So for example, if the price of peanut butter goes up, you might expect the quantity of Y that's demanded to go down simply because a lot of people use their jelly with peanut butter and they make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And if it costs more to buy peanut butter and they buy less peanut butter, they need less jelly. Now, in addition to whether the sign of the cross-price elasticity is positive or negative, we also care about the size, okay, in absolute value terms. If a 1% change in the price of X leads to a more than 1% change in the quantity of Y, then X and Y have a high cross-price elasticity. And that means that that's going to be a problem for the industry because, a small change in the price of our good is going to cause people to buy a whole lot more of some other type of product. Okay? We should also note that cross-price elasticities can change over time. For example, it used to be that landline phones and cell phones were not really substitutes for one another. People kept them separately, right? You got yourself a cell phone, but you still had a landline phone. But now a lot of people are starting to shift away from landline phones. As the landline phone price goes up, they cancel their landline phone and they get a cell phone. Okay, as I said before, larger cross-price elasticities with an industry's product pose a greater threat to industry profitability. There's also another factor that's important to the threat of substitutes, and that's what we call switching costs. Is it expensive or costly to switch to a different type of product? And a good example of this is if you happen to be a person who's traveling on business. Well, you have several choices of transportation. You can rent a car, or you can use mass transit or get a cab. Now, if you don't have a driver's license, if you happen to live in Manhattan or Washington, D.C., or someplace that has a very good mass transit system, you may not have a driver's license. So if you're traveling on business, there's a high cost to switching from taking the bus or the train to renting a car, because you can't just rent a car. You'll have to go out and get a driver's license. And then you'll have to learn to drive, you'll have to get auto insurance and stuff like that. So it's very costly to shift there. So in that case, you're not likely to make the switch. Okay? And there are other types of things where it's more difficult to make the switch. It may be costly to switch from driving a car to riding a motorcycle. Okay? First you have to get a motorcycle. You also have to get a special license for riding a motorcycle. And you're also going to, it can be very costly. I mean, if you happen to be in a place that has nice weather, maybe you'll be able to ride the motorcycle a lot. But if you're in a place that's quite cold, you're generally not going to ride the motorcycle. When it's raining, they're not exactly perfect substitutes. On a nice sunny day, they may be pretty good substitutes. So there's a switching cost to doing that. And oftentimes people won't take that into account, or will take that into account. And if it's too costly to switch, they won't switch.